Lisa Owen. Haere Akine, yet more golden moments at the Comm Games, silver and bronze too. Count them, 10 in total today. Checkpoint was practically in the pool for Lewis Clarebert's race. We'll have all the shining moments. A year-long investigation and a 400-page report into building supplies nails down this conclusion. Competition in the industry is not working as well as it could. So what is the answer to cutting construction costs now? There's a tit for tat over tax at Parliament, and finally a chance for Black Grace to dance like the world is watching again. And an investigation is launched in the US after a pilot goes AWOL from the cockpit mid-flight. Check us out, Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5. Ahi Marie, ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. A light plane that took off from Franz Josef this morning is missing in the Southern Alps. The Rescue Coordination Centre has launched a search for the missing aircraft, which took off around 9 a.m. this morning, bound for Rangiora. The aircraft was reported overdue by air traffic control at 11 this morning. Weather has so far hampered efforts to get resources to the area to undertake a search. Aotearoa Mount Cook Alpine Cliff Rescue is preparing to join the search and will liaise with a local helicopter operator when conditions improve. An Air Force NH-90 helicopter is also heading to the South Island to assist. Daily reported infections of COVID-19 have fallen for the second week in a row, but hospitalisations and deaths continue to climb. The head of the Public Health Agency, Dr. Andrew Auld, says hospitalisations tend to lag a week or two behind infections, with deaths 2 or 3 weeks later.
Part of the reason why we are seeing more deaths now is because it has shifted into older age groups. And so again, I guess it's just a good opportunity to remind people that second booster for older adults is effective at keeping people out of hospital and reducing deaths.
Dr. Auld says case numbers in over 65-year-olds have dropped by 21% in the last week. There are 6,152 new community cases of COVID-19 today, with 663 people in hospital and a further 49 deaths with the virus. The Master Builders Association says giving councils more direction about suitable building products will help drive prices down. The association says the Commerce Commission's draft report on building supplies is a reasonable start. It says there are more than 60 consenting authorities and some sort of centralisation is needed to make them more consistent. The association says councils need direction now on what products are suitable for use. The youth unit at Hawke's Bay Regional Prison was so damaged in this week's protest that it has had to be shut. 6 young prisoners climbed onto the roof on Monday afternoon and were there for nearly 24 hours. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has more.
4 of the prisoners were aged 18, 1 was 17 and 1 was 19. Police are investigating and say extensive damage has left the youth unit uninhabitable. It will be out of commission for some months. All youths involved in the protest and many others in the youth unit have been transferred to other facilities across the country. Police haven't ruled out laying charges over the damage. The Department of Corrections says the protest started because the prisoners couldn't access the sports area. It says a review of the incident will take several months.
And in news just to hand, searchers have found a missing plane near Mount Nicholson in the Southern Alps. The downed plane was found by a Christchurch-based rescue helicopter this afternoon. It left Franz Josef about 9 a.m. this morning heading for Rangiora. 1 person was on board. Due to inclement weather, it's currently too dangerous for searchers to access the area. Nominations for the vacant Green Party co-leadership position have closed, with James Shaw the only non-candidate. Mr Shaw was ousted from the job less than a fortnight ago after at least a quarter of delegates at the party's annual general meeting voted to reopen the position for nominations. 2 days after his removal, Mr Shaw confirmed he'd contest the leadership again. Party delegates will vote on the leadership in about a month's time. Candidates must secure the confidence of at least 75% of delegates to win the position. And the Labour Party is accusing National of being in disarray over its promise to cut taxes. Ahead of this year's budget, National announced it would index income tax thresholds and reverse every tax increase imposed by Labour. That's now been questioned by Labour, which claims National hasn't been fully upfront about its tax plan. Mr Hipkins says the National Party is divided.
Oh, it looks like a total shambles. I mean, who knows what their position is today? It seems to change from day to day. I mean, they've now done flip-flop on their flip-flop, so who knows?
National's Chris Bishop says the policy, announced in March, was a proposal for the budget. He says National will take a tax package to next year's election that will contain changes to income tax thresholds. To sport, and 10 medals, 3 of them gold, saw New Zealand enjoy a hugely successful day 6 of competition at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. Sam Gaze won gold in the mountain bike, Paul Cole won the men's squash title, and Hamish Kerr won the high jump, New Zealand's first men's high jump medal at a Commonwealth Games. Kerr won bronze at the Indoor World Champs earlier this year, but rates his gold in Birmingham as a greater achievement.
Commonwealth Games holds a special heart for New Zealanders. I didn't grow up watching the World Indoor Championships, but I grew up watching the Commonwealth Games, and so to come here and produce this result was unreal.
New Zealand is 4th on the medal table, with Australia at the top, England 2nd and Canada 3rd. New Zealand's won 36 medals so far, including 16 gold. Joseph Parker's long-touted fight with British boxer Joe Joyce finally looks set to happen. Several boxing websites are reporting they expect confirmation tomorrow that a fight will take place late next month. The fight has been on the cards since April, but has been dogged by contract and promotional issues. Parker hasn't fought since his win over Derek Chisora in Manchester last December. And 11 golfers, including Phil Mickelson and Bryson DeChambeau, have filed a lawsuit against the PGA Tour. The group, which now plays on the Live Golf Series, is challenging their suspension from the PGA Tour, which has banned them after they signed with the new Saudi-backed competition. That's the news.
Tonight on Night, structural engineer Michelle Grant tries to make sense of seismic assessments and how we decide when a building is likely to come down during the next big one. Neith Absalon tells us how and why he makes skateboards from recycled bottle tops. And this week's overseas correspondent, William Yang, is on the line from Taiwan, as long as it hasn't become ground zero before we get to him. On Nights of me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. From Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Mainly fine, areas of fog morning and night, isolated light showers in the east of Northland today. Fine weather forecast from Gisborne to Wairarapa. From Horowhenua to Wellington, also Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, mainly fine today, becoming cloudy tomorrow morning with isolated light showers, rains developing in Buller tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, a few showers, but rain with heavy falls in Fiordland spreading northwards tomorrow. Thunderstorms possible in Fiordland today. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, high cloud at times. Light rain possible in Southland, Clutha and the Otago Lakes until this evening. Heavy rain developing near the main divide tomorrow afternoon and scattered rain spreading elsewhere later. Northwesterlies rising to severe gale in exposed places tomorrow morning. And for Re Kohu, the Chatham Islands, fine today, low cloud tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5. I'll update you with the latest headlines and traffic news at 5:20.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. A building sector at breaking point, rising costs, supply shortages, and that's if you can even track down a builder. Analysis and the Minister coming up. But we begin tonight with some good news. Another flood of medals on the day 6. New Zealand is set to make history at the Commonwealth Games. 10 more podium performances have taken the team to 36 medals in Birmingham. And with our collection of gold growing by 3, New Zealand's record gold medal haul is all but guaranteed to be broken. Clay Wilson wraps up all the latest success.
Being a Commonwealth Games champion is one thing, being a back-to-back Commonwealth Games gold medalist is quite another. He kisses the flag, he gazes upwards, Sam Gaze gets it done. A master...
Oh, he's made the error, he's made the error! 11-7. Cole finally takes the goal. And Stark is unsuccessful. That will mean Hamish Kerr will win the Commonwealth Games title.
Add 3 more to the tally. Squash star Paul Cole, high jumper Hamish Kerr and mountain biker Sam Gaze, ensuring New Zealand continues to bask in a Golden Games glow. Emotions running high for Greymouth's golden boy after becoming the first Kiwi men's squash player to take a Commonwealth singles title.
A bit lost for words. It was a massive battle out there, and I was struggling to concentrate from start to finish, and I was sort of getting a bit lost out there sometimes, but I'm just proud of the way I turned it on fourth and the fifth when it really counted and come back from 2-1. I'm ecstatic, man. I'm over the moon. I'm hurting right now, but I couldn't be happier. Having gone one better than his silver 4 years ago, Cole pretty clear on where his gold medal will go. Around my neck. It's going to stay there for a while, and then, after a couple of weeks when I take it off, it might go into my trophy cabinet. Also carving out history, a Cantabrian soaring to gold at the main stadium. After becoming the first New Zealander to win a global high jump medal in March, Kerr now the first Kiwi man to medal in the sport at the Commonwealth Games.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm just so stoked. I don't really have the words. I came in here and I knew that I had some good form in my legs, and I just had to trust it. And we're able to get a few first attempts and get into the swing of things, and I think the rest is history. At the mountain biking, it was more about adding to history than creating it. Gaze produced a dominant title defence, with teammate Ben Oliver completing a second straight Kiwi 1-2. Trailing Gaze last time around was Anton Cooper, who was forced to withdraw in Birmingham with COVID. Now two-time gold medalist Gaze, happier with how he held himself in victory after the Gold Coast controversy with Cooper.
Everything happens for a reason. I think it's made me the person that I am today. For sure, it's been a turbulent 4 years, and I've had my ups and downs, and I'm a lot more proud of this version of myself coming back 4 years later. While the three golds shone brightest, they were by no means the end to the latest Kiwi success. There was a triple treat for our judo team, silver to Cody Andrews, and a bronze each for Moira Costa and 19-year-old Sydney Andrews. Silver too for weightlifter David Letty, adding to his memorable gold on the Gold Coast, while swim star Lewis Clareburt completed an impressive campaign in adding 200 medley bronze to his earlier pair of golds. And back at the track, a breakout bronze to shot putter Maddie Wishy with a little help from a good luck charm, her prized pair of Prada sunglasses.
I did keep the sunnies. I took them off for a couple of throws. They did fall off, which I freaked out a little bit that they broke, but they held together good.
Coming just 5 months after Dame Valerie Adams stepped away from competition, Wishy's success suggests the legacy created by New Zealand's shot put queen is in good hands. The 23-year-old happy to make good on a pre-games commitment to make her own international mark.
I think I have. I've still got a couple more years to go in growing as an athlete, but I think I'm getting there.
10 more medals wasn't the only reason to celebrate either. Among the best of the rest, sprinter Zoe Hobbs, who hot-footed it to 6th as she became the first Kiwi woman to reach a Commonwealth 100-metre final since the Auckland Games in 1990. A Games where New Zealand scooped 17 golds, a record on the brink of falling, with 16 already in the bag in Birmingham. With the doubles still to come at the Squash Centre, Paul Cole determined to help the class of 2022 set a new mark for Commonwealth success.
My job's not done, mate. I'm not celebrating until the end of the tournament. I'm definitely going to enjoy this gold around my neck. I might sleep with it tonight, but I've got another job to do, and me and Joelle will be out there tomorrow fighting for everything.
The New Zealand team with every intention of keeping their gold rush going.
The building industry is at breaking point with soaring costs, supply shortages and a lack of builders. But the Construction Minister says it will be next year before she officially responds to a Commerce Commission investigation into the industry. In a report almost a year in the making, the Commission has given its assessment. The sector is not as competitive as it should be. The watchdog has delivered a list of proposals, though it stops short of any radical shake-up. Among the recommendations, look at ways to bring in new products and cut bureaucracy, centralise and share information about key building supplies, and streamline consenting and product approval processes for the more than 60 building consent authorities. In a moment, we'll hear from the Minister, Megan Woods, but first this from our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Get your hard hats and hivers on. It's a construction crisis. Builders on the brink, battling supply and worker shortages and sky-high costs.
I've never seen anything like this. It even beats pre-GST days.
Steve Brown has been building for more than 4 decades. He says the cost pressures are enormous, with building materials up 18% in the past year.
They can put the price up anything they like. There doesn't seem to be any justification, just a percentage. This is what is estimated it's going up this week. Someone needs to do something.
The government knows it too. Late last year, it tasked the Commerce Commission with investigating the sector and whether competition is working. No surprises, it's not.
We've reached the preliminary view that competition in the supply of key building supplies is not working as well as it could.
The Commission's chair, Anna Rawlings, has released a draft report. It warns of restrictive land covenants and rebates which disadvantage smaller businesses. It recommends fewer regulations, smoothing the pathway for new products to come to market.
It's too slow and costly and uncertain to get them accepted for general use.
It's not really telling us anything we didn't already know, to be honest.
Carl Taylor chairs CBS Cooperative, a collective representing some 900 tradespeople. He's underwhelmed and doubts the report will bring meaningful change.
It's not really going to help too much unless people change their mindset in terms of how they can actually bring materials into New Zealand.
This is an invaluable piece of work that is not only uncovering, but I think bringing everything together is where the real power of this report is.
Plaudits from the Building Minister, but no plan of action yet. Megan Woods is waiting for the Commission's final report and recommendations before pressing ahead. The opposition parties want action now.
The CommComm report validates what ACT has been saying since as early as 2017.
Government should have been working on this for the last 4.5 years. They haven't, unfortunately, and the result is that Kiwis are paying too much for products when they're trying to build a house.
The National Party also wants the Commission to look closer at whether any big businesses need to be broken up. The Commission's initial conclusion is no. Megan Woods says she will pay close attention to its final findings in that area.
People need to look at what has happened with previous market studies. We have taken them very seriously. We've looked at the recommendations. We have made changes that are in the interests of ordinary New Zealanders.
Those changes, though, won't come till at least the year's end. The Commission is now inviting feedback, with the final report not back till December.
OK, so as you heard there, the investigation's taken a year and the report is about 400 pages long. The final report and conclusive recommendations still months away, and the Building and Construction Minister says it will be next year before she has an official response. We spoke a little earlier. Competition is not working as well as it could. Are you absolutely stunned by that revelation?
Look, I don't think this will come as a great shock to anybody. It's the very reason why we asked for the market study to be done. It was a Labour Party manifesto commitment at the last election, and we've delivered on that. But what we really wanted was the detailed work of the Commerce Commission to come forward with some recommendations. And what we've got today with this preliminary report is a really important stepping stone on that path.
Right, we're already a year into it, right? The investigation, almost 400 pages in this report. Is it going to mean building products are cheaper and building is cheaper? And if so, by when?
Well, a lot of that depends on the final recommendation. So we get the final report in December. The government has to consider the recommendations, and that will be early next year that we'll put out a formal response to those recommendations. I think one of the things that we've heard from the Commerce Commission today is actually another of their suggestions they're pointed to work that is already underway. So it's not a matter of waiting to start. So they've pointed explicitly to the work that's going on in terms of plasterboard, and that some of the stuff around the guidance to building consent authorities to make sure that people understand how to do the substitutions, that's already happening, and we'll continue to kind of parallel track those suggestions. We certainly won't be waiting.
Okay, well, let's look at
formal process.
Let's look at that, Minister. So you raised the plasterboard situation. MB compiled a list of acceptable substitute products in the situation with plasterboard. Master Builders has come out today saying this is a role that MB could fulfil now in a wider scope, right? So why don't they compile a list of acceptable substitute products across some other core products right now?
Yeah, and look, you're exactly right. We've done that in plasterboard. So I think what we're demonstrating and what the Commerce Commission today have demonstrated, what gives them confidence in their suggestions, is some of this is happening in real time already. So I don't think it's a question of if we would do that. We can point to where we are. So certainly if it makes sense with other products, certainly we can look at doing that. The feedback I'm getting from the industry is that it has worked. And that's
Okay,
kind of
so
one of the
why not
critical
expand it to other products and do it now? Because people are looking for some relief now.
So, Lisa, I'm not ruling that out. That's the point of what I'm saying to you. I'm saying we're demonstrating we can do it. And what I'm saying is that if it needs to be done in other products, certainly not ruling that out.
Okay, could you go a step further and require all councils or consenting bodies to accept equivalent materials that have been certified by MB? Put on the list, said it's an OK substitution. Could you go a step further and say you must allow those products to be used and you must sign off on them?
So it's a little bit more complicated than that, and this is where it's really important to read the report carefully and to look at the work that we've done in plasterboard. So we have done exactly that in terms of working with the building consent authorities and the various councils. A lot of it is actually, the Building Act actually allows for it now. It's about making sure that there's simplified processes, that everybody in those councils understands how to do the variations, and that's what we've been putting the effort into. So we've got to make sure it's not just a matter of saying thou must. It's actually also putting together the guidance so those building inspectors and people in the consent authorities understand how to do it.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it, Minister? You say they're allowed to do it now, but they aren't necessarily doing it. So don't they need a firm directive or, an absolute from you to do it?
And that's what we've done with plasterboard. And I think
this is about
really
other
important.
products, Minister.
Yeah.
And if you think the plasterboard situation has worked, why not move now and expand it to other core materials?
Lisa, I don't think we're disagreeing with each other. What I'm saying is that we have to take the process that we've demonstrated has worked in plasterboard, and we have to look at it product by product.
So when will you do that?
Look, I've said we're open to doing it. I'm not going to give you a date now. I will take soundings from industry and the people who are on the front line about what the most necessary work is.
Okay, so the report has found that it's really hard to get innovative new products approved for use, right? So this idea that you could potentially give automatic sign-off to building materials that have been approved by jurisdictions with high-quality regulators and similar seismic situations, for example, will you push ahead with that rather than make products start the whole process from scratch when they come to New Zealand?
So we already do have some international certification that is allowed in New Zealand, but I think that's a really interesting recommendation that is in the report in terms of having that centre of excellence, but also that register and how it is that you can sort of bring everything together into one place. So all that information is centralised. I'm really looking forward to seeing a bit more detail about that in the final report when it comes through in December. I think it's a really sensible suggestion on the face of it, and really want to see how that progresses through the system.
The thing is, Minister, you talk about having all the information, but the reality is the cost of building products went up 18% in the last year. People don't have time to wait. It's a year already with this report, more months for the final recommendation, 400 pages of information. When is it going to result in cheaper building products and cheaper construction in this country?
Well, I think, Lisa, that as you know, with market studies, there is a process. I mean, if we thought we had all the answers, why would we have asked the Commerce Commission to do a very detailed piece of work that is a market study that gets right down into the details, into the weeds, where there is stuff that makes sense and it's pragmatic to do, we'll do it. But certainly, I respect the fact that there is a real reason why we do market studies, and I'm not going to pretend that politicians have all the answers.
And that's the Building and Construction Minister, Megan Woods. It is 22 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Would love your feedback. Homai o whakaaro, do you think that Commerce Commission report is going to lead to cheaper construction costs? Let us know your thoughts. Hey, and we'd really love to know what your favourite moment is from the Commonwealth Games so far. There's been a lot of great golden moments. Let us know which one you've got stuck in your head. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines. Ko Eve anō tēnei.
Tēnā koe Lisa. Infections of COVID-19 have fallen for the second week in a row, but hospitalisations and deaths continue to climb. There are 6,152 new community cases of COVID-19 today, with 663 people in hospital, and a further 49 people have died with the virus. Searchers have found a plane that went missing in the Southern Alps today. The downed plane was found by a Christchurch-based rescue helicopter this afternoon. One person is on board. Due to weather conditions, searchers are unable to access the area. The Master Builders Association says the Commerce Commission's draft report on building supplies is a reasonable start. The association says giving councils more direction about suitable building products will help drive prices down. The youth unit at Hawke's Bay Regional Prison was so damaged in this week's protest that it has had to be shut. 6 young prisoners climbed onto the roof on Monday afternoon and were there for nearly 24 hours. James Shaw is the only known candidate for the vacant Green Party co-leadership position he was ousted from after nominations closed today. Less than a fortnight ago, a quarter of delegates voted to reopen the position for nominations. And Green Party MP Aotearoa Tuiono has launched a private members' bill to strike out an act that voids the citizenship of people born in Samoa during New Zealand's colonial rule between 1924 and 1948. Mr Tuiono says New Zealand's colonial legacy requires more than just words of apology. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, a crash on State Highway 1 in Raumonga, Southern Whangarei near Southend Ave is slowing down traffic while tow trucks clear the area. In Auckland, expect quite a few closures across Auckland's motorways tonight, including State Highway 1 southbound from Silverdale to Aotearoa Valley Road from 9 p.m. And in the South Island, State Highway 94, Milford Road has closed about 20 minutes ago because of the avalanche hazard. Our next headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Ngā mihi e ho. Returning to the Commonwealth Games in 10 medals overnight, among them Wellington swimming sensation Lewis Clareburt, who snagged his third medal, this time a hard-fought bronze. The 23-year-old finished the men's 200-metre individual medley in a brisk 1 minute and 57.59 seconds this morning. His performance cheered on from the sidelines and swim lanes just after 6 a.m, as reporter Katie Todd and camera operator Marika Habazi report.
A multi-sensory viewing experience. This group at Swimtastic Swim School in Auckland taking a breather from their strokes to watch Lewis Clareburt on the big screen above the pool. The 23-year-old has caused waves in Birmingham, bagging 2 gold medals in the 200-metre butterfly and 400-metre individual medley. His performance in the 200-metre men's medley today was close to his personal best, but not quite enough to outstrip winner Duncan Scott from Scotland or second-place getter Tom Dean from England. Swimtastic Chief Executive Mark Bone, also a former national swim coach, says Clareburt would have felt like he was carrying the weight of the nation as he stepped onto the block a third time.
But look, it was a good performance. He was just outside his own personal best. It was a great race, and that was the big thing. Probably just a little finesse things on his turn, particularly his last turn, possibly cost him just a little bit too slow under the water and too long under the water.
Still, Clareburt's Commonwealth haul has awed those with first-hand experience of the competitive swim scene. Richard Lockhart has raced in breaststroke in the Commonwealth Games, Olympics and World Masters Games.
He can hold his head high. He's had a great meet. New Zealand swimmers have altogether had a very good meet, exceeded expectations.
We haven't had much of that in recent years, so it's just great to see that all of the hard work in the pool is paying off now.
And that's Alice Waldo, who's on a swim scholarship in the United States. New Zealand swimmers don't exactly have it easy. As Mark Bone explains, they're up against a shortage of pool space.
You know, this is all about bricks and mortar, and we don't have enough 50-metre pools in New Zealand, and that's what they need to race in when they come to the international competitions. There is on the Gold Coast something like 10 50-metre pools in that small area of the Gold Coast. We wouldn't even have 10 50-metre pools in the whole of New Zealand. It's just crazy. We've got to get more 50-metre pools, and we've got to utilise them.
Speaking to media in Birmingham after the race, Lewis Clareburt says he hopes to inspire the next generation of swimmers. He describes being on the world stage as a dream come true.
And you can see the video version of Marika and Katie's story on our webpage. Pretty cool, all of those people sitting in the pool watching. It's been tit for tat over tax at Parliament today. The row blew up after a news report claiming National had parked its policy to effectively give people a tax cut. Now the party says the same approach will be taken in election year, but it may look different depending on the state of the books. And as our political editor Jane Patterson reports, Labour seized on the opportunity to troll the opposition.
Tax cuts are a familiar theme in National Party election campaigns, and Chris Luxon is carrying on the tradition. He announced a tax relief package delivered through threshold changes back in March, with the suggestion Finance Minister Grant Robertson pick it up for the May budget. Labour's now questioning whether indexation has been abandoned. National's finance spokesperson Nicola Willis says tax relief will be a cornerstone of the party's 2023 election campaign.
We are committed to adjusting tax thresholds to take inflation into account. What we're seeing is that many New Zealanders are paying a lot more tax because they've been pushed into higher tax thresholds. We're also committed to putting forward a responsible tax plan that responds to the economic and fiscal conditions in front of us next year.
But Labour's Chris Hipkins came out swinging, not as a government minister, but as the MP for Rimutaka.
Every day their policy seems to be changing, and I think, ultimately it's more evidence that New Zealanders simply can't trust them to come up with anything coherent. Look, if you can't hold a coherent position in opposition, how on earth could you run the country?
Chris Hipkins put out a press statement this morning in his capacity as the Labour MP for Rimutaka. So I'm putting out a statement and speaking to it as Chris Bishop, the National List MP based in Hutt South.
National's Chris Bishop was having none of it.
This morning we've seen a desperate Labour Party fire up the spin machine to try and distract attention from the cost of living payment debacle.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern chipped in when asked about National's policy while out and about in Auckland.
Look, obviously the policies of the opposition are a matter for them, and whether or not voters feel that they are consistent and therefore trustworthy, also a question for them too.
Nicola Willis dismisses any accusations of tricky business around tax policy.
National has been consistently clear that we are the party that stands for tax reduction. The difference between National and Labour couldn't be starker.
As part of its broader tax package, she says National remains committed to getting rid of both any new taxes introduced by Labour and the $180,000 top tax threshold in a first term.
It's 29 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And it is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nāna called Giles Beckford, who joins us live from Wellington. Hey, Giles, it seems like we can't get enough duvets, spatulas and cake tins from Briscoe's. What's the deal?
Well, they would have to probably take the label of one of the most successful retail operations that this country's seen in recent decades. I can't remember a company that has consistently increased its sales and its profits year in, year out, apart from Briscoe's. They really have found the winning formula. Rod Duke, somewhat gregarious chief executive, and a very bright personality, holds together the group quite well. He does control the company through his shareholdings, but they've come out with a quarterly report. Their sales are up around 3%, split between the homeware and the Rebel Sports operations. They're also reporting increased online sales. It'd be interesting to see whether that sort of growth is being seen by other big nationwide retailers. I suspect not. We'll wait and see on that. They reckon that their half-year profit may be down just a shade. It was about $48 million last year. It could be a few million below that. But because they have another record annual profit, which means that they would be topping about $88 million for the full year. And they note that they've actually been carrying more stock, which of course means that they've had to fork out more money to hold that stock, to get round supply chain disruptions, which they actually don't see any particular chance of easing much before the end of the year at the earliest.
And Giles, the world's biggest rental car company coming to New Zealand. Which one's that?
Sometimes they just sneak in under the radar, and perhaps in this case it's driven in underneath the barrier. But it's a company from the States called Enterprise, which probably means nothing much to us, but they've done a partnership with local operation called Go Rentals, which is Alamo, National and enterprise brands. You'd think, well, so what? But interesting that the world's biggest rental car company should see New Zealand as a growth market. They're struggling, like all the other rental car companies, to actually get wheels on the road available for hiring. It's not going to be cheap. They're suggesting that the prices are up 20-25% on where they were pre-COVID. They have one little novelty offer for those who want to hire a car. They've got some Teslas to rent out. And the selling point there, I suppose, apart from the novelty of being all electric, is you don't have to fill up the tank when you return the car.
Too true. That's always a pain, isn't it? OK, let's take a jolly old trot round the markets.
The top 50 index, the local share market, gained another 30 points off its highs. Should note that Commerce Commission building report, no effect at all on building-related companies. Fletcher Building just up a cent. Of course, those companies, by and large, escaped too much attention from that report. So that's 6 days in a row that the top 50 index is up, and that's the first time since mid-March that that's happened. On the currency front, New Zealand dollar 62.9 US and 90.4 Australian.
Thank you, Giles. Giles Beckford joining us live from Wellington there. Time to get moving on construction costs now, and that's Master Builders' response to a report concluding there's not enough competition in the building supplies market. The Commerce Commission investigation makes 9 recommendations aimed at opening up competition and cutting red tape. It's taken about a year and 400 pages to get to this point, and the Construction Minister says she'll finalise her response next year. Well, joining us now is David Kelly, CEO of the Master Builders. David, what do you make of the pace at which things are moving?
Look, I didn't expect any big bang, and I didn't have great hopes, to be honest, from this, but I'm actually pleasantly surprised that they have identified 2 or 3 critical things, and one of them, as you just said, is around the regulatory regime. Just to explain that, there are nearly 70 councils around New Zealand that are responsible for building consents, and they're all grappling with whether new products meet the building code or not. From my perspective, that's hopeless, really, and it's an impossible task. What we need is actually authoritative advice, presumably really from the central regulator, MB, and what we've seen with the GIB task force is it can be done. So we need to move on that now, and we can. OK, David, so a few things to unpack there. Is it a scenario where you could use a product, let's say in Dunedin, it would be signed off, but if you try and use it in Auckland, the council may say, no? Potentially, yes. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. We've only got one building code, but we've got nearly 70 councils trying to interpret what that means. So in terms of things they can do now, what are you talking about? A mandatory directive to councils about how to handle new products? Yeah, so what the Commerce Commission talked about was a centre of excellence. I think that can be done under the current regime where the regulator, which is MB, they have the power to do 2 things. One is they can issue guidance, which normally councils will pick up, or they can actually issue a directive that certain things must be accepted. I think the guidance is often the easier way and a good way to go. But MB has not been particularly active in that area over the last few years. So with the plasterboard situation, they eventually put out a list, right? And it contained the specific product names that they felt were acceptable alternatives to GIB board, and they sent them out to the councils. What other products do you think they could do that with right now? Look, there's a range of cladding products potentially. I mean, part of the problem, Lisa, is we don't know what we don't know, because potential products that might be used overseas, they might not even bother coming into New Zealand because they just think, well, the market's small and the perceived barriers around getting consent are too high. So, look, I think I can't really answer your specifics, but I think if we take a quite different approach, lower those barriers, make it easier, and we have a regulator that issues guidance or directives that cover the whole of New Zealand rather than each council trying to work it out, I think potentially that's a really big move. The other thing, though, it's not just about the products, it's about certainty. We actually think that the idea of a centre of excellence or this sort of thing should go broader than just products. we, firmly believe that having 70 councils trying to do building consents across New Zealand, all inconsistently, is just not working. And so we do have the opportunity right now, with a review of the consenting system, to try and come up with something much better.
Would you be comfortable, because the report says we need to bring new products in and have greater innovation, would you be comfortable with products coming in with a seal of approval as long as a similar overseas jurisdiction, with similar seismic regulations, have said, yep, this is okay? Would you be happy for those products to be greenlit without having to go through a separate process here in New Zealand?
We just need to make sure that what they have been approved against are similar to New Zealand. But if that's there and they are, for instance, Europe or North America, which have very good standards, yes, I think we should align that as much as we can.
The other issue raised was rebates, where merchants, sellers, are being given basically a cashback, right? If they stock a certain percentage of goods and all the rest of it, which can cut out, the Commerce Commission said, any new players entering the market. Should they be canned, outlawed?
Yeah, look, I think what they said, and they're particularly talking about where you've got a product supplier trying to or potentially trying to work with a merchant to say, look, the more you stock of my product, the more the rebate you get. And the question is, what's the line where you cross over into being anti-competitive? I'm really interested to see, because they seem to imply that there is at least one situation they're going to follow up with. I'll be really interested to see if that goes ahead, because I think we do need to set a line in terms of what's acceptable and what's not. At the moment, it's really unclear.
Do you reckon there was enough input into this from people frontline in the industry, builders and associated trades? Because looking at some of the submissions, there seemed to be a nervousness about making your feelings felt. So I'm wondering if your views were actually reflected in this report.
Oh, I think that's a fair point. In fact, I was talking to an external lawyer this afternoon, and he made exactly that point. He said, look, you as master builders and others need to take the lead in getting builders to talk about what does it mean for their business and their frustrations, because that's important, because otherwise it's just vested interest. So I think it is really important, and I would really encourage builders and other trades and designers to actually submit, because it will make a difference in my view.
Appreciate your time, David. That's David Kelly from the Master Builders Association. He's the CEO. It is 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Let us know your thoughts on that report from the Commerce Commission into the cost of building. I'm sure if you're doing a renovation, anything, building a deck, whatever, you would have noticed the prices. Also, do let us know your favourite moment from the Comm Games. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or there's always email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines. Anea iwi mina piti kōrero.
Kia ora, Lisa. Due to bad weather, it's currently too dangerous for searchers to get to a light plane that went down in the Southern Alps today. The plane took off from Franz Josef at about 9 a.m, bound for Rangiora, with one person on board. No decision has yet been made on when people aged under 50 will be offered a second booster shot against COVID-19. The Health Ministry's Public Health Agency says Pharmac is still assessing the evidence. Health officials say they want to engage better with the communities being disproportionately affected by monkeypox. The virus can infect anyone, but gay, bisexual and other men who have sex with men have seen higher rates of infection in the current global outbreak. China is preparing to begin a series of large-scale military exercises, including live fire drills in the air and sea around Taiwan, in response to Speaker of the US House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island. The US National Security Council spokesperson says they're watching the situation closely and have urged Beijing not to escalate tensions. And 30 new marine species have been discovered by a scientific expedition in a deep-sea fracture in the Pacific Ocean. An expedition to the Clarion-Clipperton Zone has found a range of extremely rare microfauna, from starfish to sea cucumbers, living in darkness at depths of 4,000 to 5,500 metres. Those are the headlines. Looking at the updated traffic in Auckland on State Highway 18, a crash is blocking the right eastbound lane on Upper Harbour Highway between Paul Matthews Road and the State Highway 1 interchange. And in the South Island, an avalanche hazard means State Highway 94 Milford Road closed at 5 p.m. this evening between Hollyford and Westgate. I'll have the latest news and weather for you at 6.
Kia ora rā e hoa. The number of COVID cases continues to fall for the second week running, but the pressure on hospitals is unrelenting, and the daily death toll may keep tracking up for weeks yet. Ruth Hill reports.
Most New Zealanders can breathe a soft, non-sibilant sigh of relief that the current wave of Omicron infections appears to have peaked. However, health workers and older people are still in the thick of it, with 663 people in hospital today, including 14 in intensive care, and a further 49 people have died. Speaking at a media update this afternoon, the head of the Public Health Agency at the Ministry, Dr Andrew Old, has said daily case rates have fallen everywhere, dropping 18% in the week to Sunday. Yet hospitalisations were up 35%.
Hospitalisations tend to lag sort of 1 to 2 weeks, and deaths a little bit longer than that, so sometimes sort of maybe 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks out. Part of the reason why we are seeing more deaths now is because it has shifted into older age groups, and so again, I guess it's just a good opportunity to remind people that a second booster for older adults is effective at keeping people out of hospital and reducing deaths.
Dr Old says it's still possible that hospitalisation rates could peak at more than 1,000 occupied beds, but it's now tracking closer to 850.
We will continue to watch these numbers closely, as there always remains the potential for a resurgence in COVID cases and hospitalisations.
The total number of people aged over 12 who have had at least 2 doses of vaccine has increased 9.6% in the last 8 months, from 3.63 million to 3.98 million. From next week, vaccination rates are going to drop, but just on paper. The Health Ministry is updating its data set, adding everyone who's used health services in 2021, an extra 230,000 people.
Put simply, it's the same number of people vaccinated, but we're now dividing that by a bigger number.
The Ministry is also dropping the term fully vaccinated, which didn't include boosters. Now a person is considered up to date if they've had all the vaccinations to which they're entitled. Some Māori academics and statisticians had criticised the Health Ministry for not using census data, pointing out that because fewer Māori accessed health services, they were simply not being counted, and therefore vaccination rates were worse than reported. However, Dr Old says the Ministry's data collection has been reviewed and endorsed by Statistics New Zealand. He says the health system user data represents real people, allowing health providers to target areas where vaccination rates are low, or even text individuals.
The 2021 dataset has about 35,000 more Māori in it than the 2020 dataset did, and that's due in a large part to the success of the vaccination campaign, finding Māori who had not previously been engaged with health services. So that's a significant win.
National Director of the Public Health Service Te Whatu Ora, Dr Nick Chamberlain, says vaccination remains a cornerstone of the COVID-19 response, along with working with Māori and Pacifica providers.
To make sure providers like these can continue to support whānau through this Omicron response, $26.9 million has been allocated under the recently announced Māori and Pacifica Omicron response package.
For those under 50 eagerly awaiting their second booster, Dr Old says Pharmac is still assessing the evidence. But rest assured, there's plenty of vaccine to go around.
To the US now, where the National Transportation Safety Board is investigating after one of 2 pilots involved in an emergency landing vanished mid-air. Details from a call to police in North Carolina have revealed a panicked call from the remaining pilot after his co-pilot jumped out of their damaged plane as they prepared to make an emergency landing. Joe Fisher reports.
We do have one subject who is not on the aircraft.
About 20 minutes before this emergency landing at RDU, officials say a 911 call is what put an all-out search in motion for a co-pilot who exited the plane mid-flight.
Hi, this is from Raleigh Airport. We have a pilot that was inbound to the field. His co-pilot jumped out of the aircraft. He made impact to the ground, and he
We were able to confirm with the 911 center that it was a call from the FAA.
From the air, the pilot notified air traffic control, who then called 911.
So they said he jumped out the aircraft. His co-pilot jumped out without the parachute, so he might have impacted the ground.
More than 80 first responders from several agencies started scouring southern Wake County before the aircraft even landed.
RDU was able to provide us some flight path information, last known points, contact, just to be able to corroborate timings as well as known locations of the aircraft.
4 hours later, the co-pilot, Charles Crooks, was found dead in the tree line of this Fuquay-Varina neighborhood. Today, the NTSB took over the investigation, writing preliminary information indicates the airplane sustained substantial damage to the landing gear and fuselage. NTSB will determine the scope of its investigation after additional information is obtained and confirmed. No doubt the pilot's communication from the cockpit will be key in piecing together this mid-air mystery.
I mean, I'm sure this pilot's going to be shaken up. I have no idea. He literally just said, my pilot just jumped out.
Curious. The Ministry of Health has confirmed community transmission of monkeypox is likely before a prevention campaign exists. 3 cases have been confirmed in New Zealand, and it's estimated there have been more than 23,000 cases since May in countries where the virus is not usually endemic. Jake McKee reports.
RNZ asked questions about the government's response almost 2 weeks ago and again yesterday. Most of the questions were only explicitly answered after RNZ attended a Health New Zealand press conference today. Health New Zealand National Director Nick Chamberlain confirmed they're still working on a communication plan.
I've got a plan with timeframes for various aspects of the plan and communication to be completed. My understanding is within the next couple of weeks or so.
Dr Chamberlain says the plan officials have contains most of the actions outlined in the letter they received on Wednesday. Key to that is the establishment of a dedicated monkeypox response team. He also does not think New Zealand's current response reflects how gay, bisexual and other men who have sex with men are being disproportionately affected by the current global outbreak, despite the virus being able to infect anyone.
No, we don't believe our approach is. So we have been working with the Burnett Foundation. Both Dr. Arnold and I have an appointment with the CEO next week, and we will ask the Burnett Foundation and New Zealand Sexual Health Society to participate in our ongoing planning.
Both the Burnett Foundation and New Zealand Sexual Health Society have previously been involved in the response, and those organisations were who sent the letter urging action. The Burnett Foundation told RNZ it was concerned New Zealand's approach was too similar to Northern Hemisphere countries where approaches have failed. Dr Chamberlain says that's fair enough.
I think some countries the approach has worked and in some it hasn't, and we'll learn from all of those international approaches. But we also, as I said earlier, want to make sure that our core messages are right.
Public Health Agency Deputy Director Andrew Auld thinks some countries have focused too much on vaccination and therapeutic treatment.
The point that I think is being made here is that we have a really good chance now, because we don't have any community transmission, to get ahead of this with broader public health approaches.
It was also leaked to RNZ that health officials are talking with manufacturers around a delivery schedule of vaccines and antiviral treatments. New Zealand currently has no vaccine supply, and countries around the world are struggling as there's only one manufacturer. Dr Nick Chamberlain confirmed they were looking at getting antiviral drug Tecovirimat, which would need MedSafe approval. Associate Minister of Health Aisha Verrill says she's been clear with officials that New Zealand needs effective and human rights compliant health promotion approaches.
Reflecting on my experience looking after people with other infectious diseases like HIV, it is incredibly important to work with affected communities in this outbreak, because otherwise we end up getting things wrong.
She says if we don't get how we talk about monkeypox right, people won't feel safe to get the testing and care that's needed.
At last, the opportunity to dance like the world is watching, because it is. Renowned New Zealand contemporary dance company Black Grace is back on the international stage with an actual audience for the first time since the pandemic hit. The company is in New York, no less, and is debuting new works which pay tribute to founding artistic director Neil Iramia's parents, and they also use music from composer Antonio Vivaldi. I caught up with Neil just after Black Grace came off stage at Chelsea's Joyce Theatre and asked him if COVID restrictions were still having an impact on live performances.
All the venues are testing you. People are in masks in the venues. The audiences are wearing masks, or the majority of them are. They're trying to observe their COVID protocols here, but New York, you can't tell a New Yorker what to do. So, most of their time they do what they want. If they're walking here, they're walking here. You can't tell them to get off the road. So. But the audiences have been fantastic, actually, and they're new works, so we haven't shown them to anyone. These are the first people who've seen them, so it's always a bit nerve-wracking premiering new work.
Do you still get nervous?
Oh, I wouldn't call it nerves so much. I'm very happy with what we've done. So I just feel an enormous sense of pride and can't wait to get out there and share our stories with these guys. Because, we've got such a great group working on this piece. We've got some traditional performers with, Māori and Cook Island training and Samoan training. And so we're out there mixing it all up, and we're giving these people their first ever view of work like this from the Pacific, or dance and storytelling from the Pacific. So it's amazing.
Yeah, and the dancers, they are in phenomenal physical shape. How they maintain that after kind of 2 and a bit years, 2 and a bit years where being on stage was patchy, being able to perform in front of a crowd was not a given?
Well, they tried as much as they could to sort of turn their garages and their bedrooms and lounges into, makeshift dance studios and gyms, but it never quite cuts it. I think they did a lot of work when we got back into the studio. So we had a real uphill battle, and with, shortened time frames. We normally rehearse for, a number of months before we head off on the road, but we did this in 6 weeks. So, and it was a really interrupted rehearsal period with, people getting sick and then not turning up, and then everyone having to test. And so it's just such a relief to be, finally performing and seeing these dancers really do their best. You're right, Lisa, they're in amazing shape, some of these performers.
Do you think that there is a renewed appreciation for you guys and performers generally after we've been starved of this stuff for a while, and you get used to having access to all these wonderful things and then you don't have them, but you're back now?
Yeah. Well, look, it is that thing, right? You become so used to seeing things or having things available to you that when you don't have them for a while, you start to miss them. And so I think, we've had, I know that the US are suffering, the audiences are tough here, but, we've done really well here with our performances in terms of people coming to the show. We've had lots of different presenters and company managers from other companies come along and say, look, it's been tough here, but you guys are, obviously doing quite well at the box. So that's always refreshing.
So new work, without giving it all away, because I know you're going to come back here and give us an opportunity to come and see it for ourselves. I hear there's a bit of Lord, you're wearing Zambezi costumes. What else can you tell us?
Well, there are 2 brand new works. One of them is called Fatu, which is named after the artist Fatu Fe'u, the visual artist, the painter. We widely acknowledge that he's the pioneer of Pacific art, one of the pioneers of Pacific Island art. And he sent me a painting during the lockdown, which was completely different to any of the work that he'd been, he's renowned for. His very, kind of almost pattern work, almost, based on our tapa patterns and motifs. He sent me this work. It was just it was a black background and he had 3 colours in it, and it was just as though he'd gone gone kind of wild. And he sent it to me, and I kind of like went, what are you doing? And it was amazing. There was such energy in it. Just, and I thought, if an artist, of his caliber and his age can change their practice after 50 years of practice and risk it all, that takes an enormous amount of courage. So that really inspired me, and that's one of the works that we're performing currently. And the other one is called Ole o Langa, which is Samoan for kind of like that's life, or this is what life is about. It's a real tribute, I think, in honor of my aging parents and the way that their relationships have changed. And I've been reading a book by Atul Gawande about being mortal, and how we, how we've sort of evolution and technology and the medicine has kept people alive for longer, but that doesn't necessarily mean the quality of their lives at that point are better, and so we used to have people sort of live and then die, and then live and then die, but we now have people living for longer, and then the quality of that sort of last part of their life isn't particularly great. But I'm watching my parents age, and my dad, he was a big talking chief, a big man, and he's become very vulnerable, and mum just loves him to pieces and just takes such good care of him. And that love, I was just inspired to make something to honour my parents. I've made work about all sorts of things, but I've never really made a work about my parents. So I wanted to do that while they're still alive, really.
And that is Black Race's founding artistic director, Neil Iramia, speaking from New York. They are going to be back here in September with performances in Auckland, Wellington, in Christchurch, if you want to check them out.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Kia ora tātou. Koiwi Ashton tēnei. Searchers have located a downed plane in the southern Alps after it went missing this morning. The light plane took off from Franz Josef but didn't arrive at its destination in Rangiora. Samantha G has more.
A rescue helicopter from Christchurch spotted the plane near Mount Nicholson in the southern Alps this afternoon. The plane went missing after it took off at 9 a.m, with one person on board. It was reported overdue by air traffic control at 11 a.m. The Rescue Coordination Centre says due to poor weather, it is too dangerous for searchers to access the area. It is coordinating with other agencies on the next steps for the response. The fate of the pilot is not yet known.
The Building and Construction Minister is defending how long it'll take to take action in the sector following a damning report from the Commerce Commission. The Commission's draft report says market competition isn't working as effectively as it could, with tried and tested products embedded in the system. But the final report and conclusive recommendations are still months away, with an official response from the Minister not until next year. Megan Woods has told Checkpoint the report is an important stepping stone to improving the market.
With market studies, there is a process. I mean, if we thought we had all the answers, why would we have asked the Commerce Commission to do a very detailed piece of work that is a market study that gets right down into the details, into the weeds, where there is stuff that makes sense and it's pragmatic to do, we'll do it.
Megan Woods says the results of the report were unlikely to come as a shock to anybody. China has begun a series of large-scale military exercises in the air and sea around Taiwan in response to US House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island. The exercises are taking place in some of the world's busiest waterways and include live fire drills. The US National Security Council spokesperson, John Kirby, says they're watching the situation closely and have urged Beijing not to escalate tensions.
We've made it clear that the United States is not going to participate in saber rattling, but what we also have said is we're not going to be intimidated by the threats. There's no reason whatsoever for Beijing to amp up the tensions here, to escalate things, and to turn this into some sort of a military event.
Nancy Pelosi, meanwhile, is now in South Korea. No decision has yet been made on when people aged under 50 will be offered a second booster shot against COVID-19. The head of the Health Ministry's Public Health Agency, Dr. Andrew Auld, says Pharmac is still assessing the evidence.
If we get to the point where the balance suggests that actually it would be good for the individual and good for the population to be vaccinating that cohort, then that's when we would move.
Dr Andrew Auld says vaccine supply is not a problem. The youth unit at Hawke's Bay Prison has been vacated because it's so damaged after a protest this week. 6 prisoners climbed onto the roof and were there for nearly 24 hours. Police have retracted an earlier statement which said the prisoners have moved to other parts of the country. Corrections says at the time of the incident, 27 youth offenders were in the unit. All remain at the prison in other areas. 10 mainstream prisoners were moved yesterday to other jails in the lower North Island. The Chief Ombudsman has launched an investigation into concerns councils are making decisions behind closed doors in workshops instead of in formal public meetings. Peter Boshier fears local bodies are excluding the public by using informal meetings to have free and frank discussions. Councils must generally give notice of a meeting, provide an agenda and open the meeting up to everyone. Mr Boshier says the problem is he doesn't know how widespread the use of informal meetings might be.
I know, of course, of some specific examples because I've dealt with complaints. And so I've got a sufficient concern that I need to have a deep dive and see what is going on. And let's see what that turns up.
Peter Boshier won't name the 8 councils he's focusing on. Nationals accusing Labour of dirty political games after it questioned whether the party would stick to its promise to cut taxes. Ahead of this year's budget, National announced it would index income tax thresholds and reverse every tax increase imposed by Labour. That's now been questioned by Labour, which claims National hasn't been fully upfront about its tax plan. National's Chris Bishop says the policy was a proposal for the budget. He says the party will take a tax package into next year's election. Health officials want to engage better with the communities being disproportionately affected by monkeypox. Gay, bisexual and other men who have sex with men are being disproportionately affected in the current global outbreak, but the virus can affect anyone. Health New Zealand National Director Nick Chamberlain doesn't think the country's current response reflects that.
No, we don't believe our approach is. So we have been working with the Burnett Foundation. Both Dr. Auld and I have an appointment with the CEO next week, and we will ask the Burnett Foundation and New Zealand Sexual Health Society to participate in our ongoing planning.
3 cases have been confirmed in New Zealand, and it's estimated there have been more than 23,000 cases since May in countries where the virus isn't usually endemic. Staff at the Christchurch City Mission say they're surprised to see people redirecting their cost of living payments to the charity. 1.3 million people have received the first instalment of the government's cost of living relief payment of $117. Ewan Sargent of Christchurch City Mission says 5 people donated their payments immediately after receiving them on Monday, and more donations have come through since the charity posted about it on Facebook. The agency fed over 4,000 people in July. To sport, and Silver Ferns coach Dame Nolene Taurua believes England is under greater pressure than the world champion Silver Ferns heading into tomorrow morning's crunch final pool game at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games. Both teams are guaranteed semi-finals berths, but the winner will avoid playing Australia for a place in the final. Taurua is claiming underdog status against an experienced England outfit who have home court advantage and are the defending Games champions.
Over 900 caps is amazing. They're gold medalists. They're a great outfit. Conversely with us, we're a bit shy on that. And for some of them, they're learning on the job. And if anything, there's more upside to us if we get through this than if they lose this game.
Meanwhile, after having won 3 golds at the Velodrome in London, Aaron Gate is now hunting a 4th on the roads of Birmingham. Gate won gold in the men's points race and both the team and individual pursuit, helping New Zealand to 13 medals on the track, and he doesn't intend stopping there.
The form's there, but it is kind of a different beast as the distances increase. I think for the time trial, for sure, I want to give that a good nudge, but for sure I'll be giving it everything I've got and not wasting the opportunity to pull the Silver Fern on again.
Also in action overnight are the White Ferns, who have their final T20 pool match against England. Both teams are already guaranteed semi-final spots. And in news just to hand, police believe dogs may have killed a person in the far north community of Panguru. They say initial indications suggest a deceased person found earlier today was subject to a dog attack. During attempts to secure 4 dogs at the property, 3 escaped and 1 was shot. That's the news.
This morning on First Up, one of the great events in world cinema, Danny Virk is hosting the Cannes Film Festival.
Just think this simple idea could have great outcome, great benefit, and that builds into the community spirit as well. If we can get behind these food banks, we're hoping for a great outcome.
And our work experience reporter, Grant Robertson, was across developments at the Commonwealth Games.
I've always wanted to say that I'm across developments. That's what reporters always say, that they're across developments. So I am coming to you live from Birmingham. I'm actually just sitting outside the venue for the squash.
Download First Up the podcast or join me, Nathan Rarere, live from 5 weekday mornings on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. From Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Mainly fine. Areas of fog morning and night. Isolated light showers in the east of Northland today. Fine weather from Gisborne to Wairarapa. From Horowhenua to Wellington, also Marlborough, Nelson and Bulla. Mainly fine today, becoming cloudy tomorrow morning with isolated light showers. Rain developing in Bulla tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, a few showers, but rain with heavy falls in Fiordland spreading northwards tomorrow. Thunderstorms are possible in Fiordland today. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, high cloud at times. Light rain possible in Southland, Clutha and the Otago Lakes until this evening. Heavy rain developing near the main divide tomorrow afternoon and scattered rain spreading elsewhere later. Northwesterlies rising to severe gale in exposed places tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, Aotearoa, fine today, low cloud tomorrow. It's coming up to 10 minutes past 6. I'll have the latest news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The head of the United Nations has slammed what he calls the grotesque greed of oil and gas companies, announcing record profits. Oil and gas revenues have soared as a result of global supply shortages caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is urging governments around the world to tax the excess profits of those companies to support vulnerable people. The ABC's John Daly reports.
As people across the world struggle to afford the basics, global oil and gas companies are reporting record profits. The situation doesn't sit well with people in this Hobart shopping centre.
Yeah, outraged. The small, regular people are hurting so badly and big companies just extracting the world's resources and making so much money, it doesn't seem right at all.
They're fed up with soaring prices.
Pretty rotten, really. I don't think any of us should be surprised that they're profiting so much.
Well, they should have to pay an extra tax to make up for their bumper profits, because it's just not fair. I mean, they're taking advantage of what's happening in Ukraine.
Global energy giants ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell and France's Total Energies have earned a combined $75 billion in the last quarter. That's almost double what they made the same time last year. The biggest Australian energy companies, Santos and Woodside Energy, have also reported massive increases in revenue. Santos made record revenue in the first half of this year, up 85% on the first half of last year. And Woodside Energy revenue in the June quarter was up almost 160% on the same time last year. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres says it's unacceptable.
It is immoral for oil and gas companies to be making record profits from this energy crisis on the back of the poorest people and communities and at a massive cost to the climate.
The head of the UN says governments around the world need to tax fossil fuel companies profiting from the global energy crisis.
I urge all governments to tax these excessive profits and use the funds to support the most vulnerable people through these difficult times. And I urge people everywhere to send a clear message to the fossil fuel industry and their financiers that this grotesque greed is punishing the poorest and most vulnerable people while destroying our only common home, the planet.
The Albanese government has so far refused to look at some sort of windfall tax on Australian fossil fuel companies' soaring revenue. Harriet Cater, climate lead at the Australasian Centre for Corporate Responsibility, says that position is becoming increasingly indefensible.
The social licence of oil and gas companies in Australia is on rapid decline as a result of this energy crisis and their astronomical profiteering from the war in Ukraine.
Drones are playing a critical role in the war in Ukraine, but while they help Ukrainian troops mark targets for artillery strikes, the drone operators in the field are vulnerable themselves and a mistake can cost their lives. CNN's Nick Robertson reports.
At Ukraine's southern front, a reconnaissance team leads us towards Russian lines.
We're walking through the trees because they're afraid that we might be spotted from above by Russian drones. That's the way they do their work out here, hidden by the trees.
Our destination, a drone team shrouded from the skies. Their mission, find Russian forces and call in artillery strikes. A problem, though. On their first flight of the day, Russian countermeasures mess with their drone. They need to switch out parts before the next launch. It's nearly impossible to fight off the Russian jamming signal, the commander says, but we have special devices to combat it.
There's a war within the war here, a high-tech war, a software dogfight in the skies above the battlefield, and a mistake by these drone operators can cost them their lives.
Back at base, on a big screen, they scour the first flight's video.
The detail's incredible. I mean, you can see exactly where the vehicles are in the trees.
The operator, a 24-year-old former news cameraman.
So you're looking at the Russians, but they can be looking at you when you're in the field.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
Well, it's scary.
How scary?
Very scary.
Very scary. But you keep doing it?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because we must do it.
Life or death decisions, which targets to hit to save his fellow countrymen.
He's driving along and he has no idea your drone is following him.
Yeah.
No idea.
No idea.
Previous days, when they've avoided Russian countermeasures, they've had better luck. A Russian tank position hit in the past week when they called in an artillery strike as they watched. Who wins these drone wars will help determine who dominates the battle space. And that depends on who has the smartest technology and who has the best traditional frontline skills to hide from it.
The global food crisis is exacerbating the dire situation in East Africa, which is facing a catastrophic drought. Nomadic tribes searching for grazing land have invaded wildlife sanctuaries, competing with protected animals for food and water. As CNN's Sam Kiley reports from Kenya, nearly 20 million people are facing extreme food shortages.
Abolo needs urgent help. He's about 2 and he can't walk. He's one of 6 million kids across the Horn of Africa the UN says are on the brink of starvation. There's food for her youngest, but nothing for Akurgok's other children, except for a little wheat ground into a handful of flour. She says her husband died last year. She's no livestock. She survives by selling charcoal where she can. But food prices have trebled this year. And 11.6 million people across northeastern Africa are short of water in the worst drought for 40 years. Here in Illoret, northern Kenya, local officials say that at least 85% of animals once owned by nomadic people are dead. And the UN says 1.5 million head of livestock have perished in Kenya. And across the Horn of Africa, close to 20 million people face acute food shortages. Now, the price of staple food like maize flour have more than doubled in many parts of Kenya since the disruption of global food supplies by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In short, Europe's war may soon start killing people in Africa.
This community is marginal. It's living on the brink, or the very brink,
of survival, but so are millions of people right across the region. And critical to their long-term survival is the stability of Kenya, a country that is facing drought. It is facing massive increases in the price of fuel and food, and it's now facing general elections. Instability here causes chaos across the whole Horn of Africa.
It's 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. After years of repeated and devastating mass bleaching events, the Great Barrier Reef has surprised scientists with evidence of new growth. An annual survey of the reef's health shows new coral growth over 2/3 of its length. But Australian marine scientists still fear any gains could be reversed very quickly as the climate continues to change. The ABC's Gavin Coote reports.
The Great Barrier Reef, among the world's most important ecosystems, has been in long-term decline. Coral bleaching, storm damage and the crown of thorns starfish have all put it under major stress. But today, some good news.
We've seen continued recovery over the last couple of years, and I'm happy to say that coral cover is now at the highest level that the AIMS monitoring program has recorded in 36 years.
Mike Emsley leads the Reef Monitoring Program with the Australian Institute of Marine Science, or AIMS. It's found the northern and central parts of the Great Barrier Reef are showing some promising levels of coral cover, a metric used to measure the status of the reef. Mike Emsley says it demonstrates the reef's inherent ability to recover from damaging events.
The Great Barrier Reef obviously is a large place and it's very dynamic. So coral cover has gone up and down during those 3 decades. Recently, we've seen a spate of continuous disturbances, I guess, particularly in the northern GBR, and it actually reached the lowest levels we've seen in about 2017, and it's recovered really well after a series of cyclones, crown of thorns starfish outbreaks, and of course the well publicised mass coral bleachings.
But it's not such a rosy picture for the whole reef. Coral cover over the southern section has slightly decreased, mostly due to the invasive crown of thorns starfish.
Who are starfish that eat live coral tissue. When they occur in really large numbers, they can really chew through quite a bit of that coral and reduce coral cover on reefs. And that's what we've seen. And I guess it really highlights that, even though we've seen these really encouraging signs of recovery in the north and the centre, it really doesn't take much to turn those gains around.
The impact of climate change is another major threat to the Great Barrier Reef. Jodie Rummer is a marine biologist at James Cook University. She points out there are limits to the reef's resilience, and this continues to be tested.
It's the many, many species of corals that really matter and make a very healthy ecosystem. And so we can't really afford to let our guards down right now, and having the effects of climate change front and center with these decisions that we're making as a country is really key. And that's what we need to be focusing on at the moment.
Cherry Muddle from the Australian Marine Conservation Society says while the growth in coral cover is promising, the reef remains in danger.
We all, as humankind, need to be doing everything we can to protect the reef, not just because of the 60,000 people who rely on the reef for their livelihood, but for future generations, for diversity and for marine animals themselves. We must implement a strong climate policy that holds warming to less than 1.5 degrees. This is the critical threshold for coral reefs.
The climate bill is actually going through Parliament at the moment. It's 43% emissions reduction target by 2030. Would that be enough to save the reef, in your opinion?
Look, any increased ambition is welcome, but 43% is not strong enough. What we need is no new coal and gas developments, and what we asked for was 75% emissions reduction by 2030.
The federal government says it's pledged $1.2 billion for projects that support the health of the reef. In a statement, the Environment Minister Tanya Plibersek says the AIMS report is confronting reading and shows the damage climate change is inflicting on the reef.
Australian doctors have performed a world-first operation replacing a woman's faulty breast implants with 3D printed ones. The surgery marks the start of human trials of the technology that doctors hope will eventually offer a more natural alternative to people wanting reconstructive surgery after breast cancer. The ABC's Sophie Scott reports.
How are you recovering?
Great. No, it's good.
Yeah.
It's been 5 weeks since Brisbane woman Moana Staunton underwent experimental surgery.
I feel good. I feel lighter.
She was asked to participate in the trial after approaching Brisbane breast surgeon Professor Owen Ong about having her silicone implants removed. The hope is the technology will eventually work in breast cancer patients who are wanting a reconstruction.
I have the cancer gene in my family, but I don't have the gene. So I'm the perfect person to trial it on, and I'm fit and healthy.
In simple terms, scientists use a 3D printer to create a medical-grade scaffold. It looks like an intricately woven breast implant, but rather than being made of silicone, it's made of the same material as dissolvable stitches. It's then placed into a chest cavity and injected and filled with the patient's own fat. Professor Ng from Metro North Comprehensive Breast Cancer Institute says the scaffold should dissolve over the next 2 years, but the tissue will remain.
This is something that's going to be quite natural to a woman. It's her own body tissue and will hopefully never need replacing.
It's still early days, but if it works, doctors hope it could alleviate many problems associated with implants.
They contract, they form scar tissue around them, they may not even maintain their shape. Women tell you that they get uncomfortable or hard. That's because because they're foreign, the body will tend to form a barrier around that. It's what we call a capsule.
Plastic surgeon Professor Michael Vargles from the Hurston Biofabrication Institute is also part of the team running the trial. He says it's exciting technology that's only been made possible because of advances in science and technology, much of it out of Australia.
This is what we would call a biofabricated approach to the problem of breast replacement. The thing we're trying to achieve here is something that is so, innately part of the patient that it ultimately disappears, and what's left is the patient themselves or their own tissue.
If Moana remains well, doctors hope to operate on around 20 women. A second trial will then include breast cancer patients. Professor Mark Ashton is a past president of the Australian Society of Plastic Surgeons. He's not involved in this study, but says it's an exciting time for medicine.
It has wide-ranging implications in head and neck cancer or jaw defects. It has implications in road trauma and people who've had motorbike accidents and lost tissue in their lower limbs or other parts of their body. Anywhere where we lose tissue and we are looking to try and replace that tissue, this has enormous potential.
A growing number of women are defying religious tradition in Thailand, challenging what they call the Buddhist Boys Club that bans them from being ordained as monks. Officially, only men are allowed to become monks. For females, it's forbidden. But women have found a loophole and are holding ceremonies of their own. The ABC's Mazoe Ford has more.
Anne Lotpanyawai loves her family, likes her job and keeps busy with hobbies like Thai boxing sessions. But she's been searching for more meaning.
I just think what the next chapter, what the new journey of my life.
The busy Bangkok executive has decided to take a break from it all for a couple of weeks. She's heading out of town to Thailand's first female-only Theravada Buddhist monastery to be ordained as a novice monk.
My focus is really clear that I have to do this.
Widow and farmer Aotearoa Tanakasin is going one step further. She wants to become a bhikkhuni, the ancient Indian term for a fully ordained female monk.
I have such a good life, and, enjoy my life every day. But then there are times that I feel suffer a lot after I lost my husband.
If Anne and Aotearoa were male, being ordained wouldn't be remarkable. But women aren't allowed to become monks in Thailand. The Thai clergy refuses to recognise them because it says there's no history of female monks here. Pra Tamkitamati is one of the country's most senior monks.
The monk's law doesn't endorse women, therefore they can't be ordained. If they are ordained, it's considered an offence to Buddha.
I put it to him that the Lord Buddha himself allowed women to be ordained, starting with his own stepmother in India.
Yes, that's right, but Buddha allowed that with conditions. In Thailand, it's considered that there are no bhikkhuni. Monks can't ordain women to become bhikkhuni.
The Venerable Dhammananda Bhikkhuni disagrees with that interpretation, so she went to Sri Lanka, where male monks are willing to ordain women. As Thailand's first female monk, she's ordained hundreds of women as novice monks and helped some travel to Sri Lanka for full ordination.
Each step you are aware that you are making a history. I keep telling them, that do you realize that you are part of this movement? We are on the right side of history.
Sinitsuda Ekachai is a journalist who writes extensively about Thai Buddhism.
Sexism is very deep-rooted
in our culture. And organized religion in Thailand, organized Buddhism in Thailand is not free from that sexism. It's a totally male-dominated system. It's a boys' club.
Anne and Achara join 11 other women at Dhammananda's monastery for their ordination ceremony. It's the most important day of their spiritual journey so far, and a significant moment for women in Thailand as they push for spiritual equality.
The surprise result of an abortion referendum in the conservative state of Kansas has given pro-abortion groups hope for state and Senate elections in November. The referendum was attached to the vote for each party to decide their candidates for the midterm elections. It's the first electoral test of the issue since the US Supreme Court decided in June that Americans have no constitutional right to abortion. CNN's Jeff Zeleny is in Kansas.
A surge of Kansas voters sending an overwhelming message to protect abortion rights. It was the biggest sign yet of the backlash to the Supreme Court's decision to send the question of abortion back to the states. And here in conservative Kansas, voters delivered their answer loud and clear. The abortion measure drew historic turnout for an August election, with more than 900,000 voters casting ballots, dramatically outpacing primaries in 2018 and 2020.
You cannot take people's rights away and expect there not to be some kind of engagement, some kind of activism, and we saw that in a way that I don't think anybody expected.
It was a question of whether voters wanted to amend the Kansas Constitution to allow lawmakers to further restrict or ban abortion. A resounding 59% said no, 41% said yes, with a coalition of some independents and Republicans joining forces to preserve access to abortion. 3 months before the fall elections, the outcome in Kansas reverberated across the political landscape, with Democrats expressing fresh hope that support for abortion rights could be a motivating force in November.
And that is about all we have time for. Now, the Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the evening. And just remember, if you missed anything from the program, you can always find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō. And tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up, it's no longer compulsory indoors. But if you're heading to a gig, should you be masking up? Well, First Up speaks to artists and musicians who reckon it should be. And don't forget, you can check out all our stories and in particular our videos. We'll chuck them up on our webpage and catch you tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Kia ora tātou, koiwi Ashton tēnei. The Building and Construction Minister is defending how long it'll take to take action in the sector following a damning report from the Commerce Commission. Searchers have located a downed plane in the Southern Alps after it went missing this morning. And the Chief Ombudsman has launched an investigation into concerns councils are making decisions behind closed doors in workshops instead of in formal public meetings. Those are the headlines.